Okay, so welcome to the uh, final in the series, Organic Farmer Association Collective Farmer Circle. And I'm going to be talking about improving your crop rotation because this is the time of year, December and January, where we think back to what happened last year and start planning for next year. So this is the agenda. There's kind of a whole variety of different things to consider with your crop rotation, reducing tillage, doing more cover cropping, how to fit them all in, changing the type of crop mix that you grow, working with your neighbors, all kinds of great stuff. But we'll start out by just introducing who is OFA, and that is the Organic Farmers Association. And we are farmers. We are our board of directors and our policy committee is made up of certified organic farmers, as well as some organizations that serve organic farmers, but the organizations don't get a vote. Only the farmers do. And we do a lot of things to try to serve organic farmers. We have these farmer work groups, which are different than the circles, where we talk about a specific topic and build on what issues farmers are having, things that can be done to improve. And we've actually had some successes. We've been able to get crop insurance to kind of tweak things just administratively. We didn't have to go to the law and go to Congress, which is good because they're kind of not always that responsive. And we've been able to get some good changes. We've had some good influence at the National Organic Standards Board level, which is what affects the organic regulations. Um, and we've also done a lot of good things in helping farmers with marketplace issues. The other thing, if you go on our website, we list everybody's educational activities because we obviously can't do everything. Um, but so you can go to our website and see all the different webinars because this is the time of year to start watching webinars. All right, so I'm going to talk today about crop rotation. And although somewhat focused on grain, this would affect vegetables or any kind of annual cropping system. Um, we just need to pay attention to our soil health and really look at what are we looking at when we are managing our soil. And the more that we do tillage, the more compacted it gets. And soil, the roots of plants need air as well as water and nutrients. So they need that nice, loose soil. And I had one crop consultant said, the soil should be the consistency of chocolate cake. Nice kind of it's got air in there but it holds together. Um, and so just seeing what the difference here between undisturbed soil and disturbed soil, which results in that compaction, you can see it really makes a huge difference. And anytime you have a chance to go to an organic field day or any kind of regenerative or something focused on soil health, you can really learn a lot. And you can learn a lot, especially from other farmers in your region that are working in your climatic situation, in your soil types. And I have seen a lot of very good peer-to-peer learning over time. So I just highly recommend anytime that you can meet up with other organic farmers, go to conferences and go, but especially if you can be out in the field. Um, really makes a big difference. And of course, then you get to see how their management systems are affecting their their fields and their crops. So in assessing your crop rotation, I guess my focus is going to be here on tillage and looking at what we can do to somewhat mitigate, because in organic we have to do some tillage. We're not using herbicides. So, but you can still increase organic matter every year through your use of cover crops and a whole variety of other things. So what we want is we want that good aggregated soil. We don't want that compaction. You can see there might be aggregates underneath, but in that second slide on the right, you can see how it gets compacted, and then you get this kind of erosion. And this is not good for your fields. It's not good for your crops. But it can be mitigated. And of course, it
Oh,
depends on the soil. Yep.
oh, sorry, never mind.
Okay.
We're good.
Um, so we like to see earthworms in there, making their channels, and there's so many uh there's so much life in the soil that we don't see that are really affecting the biological community in our soil, that is the one that makes those aggregates and and improves the transfer of nutrients to plant roots. So, are you maintaining or increasing your soil organic matter? That's really the first thing you should think about when you're thinking about how can I improve my crop rotation. And so, are you planting cover crops? And is it just a winter only? Do you actually have you tried any interseeding? Have you tried even putting in a short season cover crop before your main season cash crop? Here in the upper Midwest, I have seen organic producers come in and plant oats, which is a fast growing spring grain, and plant that before they plant their soybeans. You say, how can you fit that in? Well, if the season is right, they can come in like early April, and they're not going to plant their soybeans until sometimes end of May. So they've got about 6 weeks. And by incorporating those oats early in, especially in the vegetative stage, that just feeds the biological life in the soil. It adds to organic matter, and it really helps with the soil tilth. So when they are doing their cultivating of their soybeans, the soil just flows into the row and covers the small weeds. And yet it's the tillage is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you have put in all of that organic matter. So I can, and even if you're a vegetable grower, you can do the same thing. If you're going to put in, let's say, a mid-season zucchini, you could put in oats before that. And and that actually there's a slide coming up. The other thing too is if you're applying manures. So you're obviously going to get more organic matter if you're applying a manure with bedding in it, a solid, right, manure rather than a liquid. Now, the liquid manures have just as many weed seeds as the solid manures. Some people think, oh, well, there's not as many. There's quite a few. And so, again, if you can even think about using actual compost where the weed seeds have been killed off by the heating of the compost, and those nutrients have been much more locked in place during the composting process. And we use actually a mixture of compost that we spread over the whole field, and then we either side dress or put in the row um, chicken pellets just to give a little boost of nitrogen. And so there's so many different ways that you can look at what you're doing and possibly improve. If you're doing just a winter cover, let's say a winter rye or a winter wheat, um, in your fields, that's good. That's good. I'm not saying that's bad, but maybe you can look at also doing interseeding, because nature hates a vacuum. And so when there's no nothing growing. When you've just done some tillage, it's going to want to grow something. So why don't you put what you want in there rather than having the weeds grow? So this kind of shows that there's many different ways. This is from Building Soil for Better Crops, which I recommend highly, a Sarah book that you can actually read online for free or purchase or download chapters for free. SARE is the government program. Anyway, you can see that there's many different ways to fit in cover crops, doing this soil building in between your various marketed crops. So it's not just like winter only, and then my crop has to be completely done. So these are all the great reasons why we grow cover crops. And actually, a lot of people call them different things. They could be called cover crops or green manures or, erosion control. I mean, there's so many different things that cover crops do. And it's not just the crop that's growing above the soil, but even the roots underneath. So certain cover crops like tillage radish will actually help you break up compaction because they go really deep. So you're thinking about deep rooted crops, rotating your cover crops, just like you rotate your cash crops to get different benefits each year from the cover crops that you're growing. So you're going to grow sometimes deep rooted, sometimes shallow rooted, sometimes cover crops that tend to scavenge and pull up nutrients. So then when you shallowly incorporate them, they release them into the top few inches of the soil and make it readily available. Those scavenged nutrients from deeper in the soil are more available than to your cash crop. And of course, with all the extreme weather conditions that we have, improved water holding capacity, both for when we have extreme weather with too much rain. We want our soils to be able to hold as much water as possible. And we want, when we have drought, to have that soil also hold that water. And of course, also rotating your cover crops will also help break pest and disease cycles too. So this was just recently put out by ATRA, Appropriate Technology Transfer for Rural Areas. You can look them up on the internet. And I just saw this 2 days ago. I stuck it in my slideshow because look at all of the different options you have for cover crops. It's kind of amazing. And then they kind of put it all in, these are the legumes. These are the, different, what kind of water demand they would need during, to germinate and to also keep them growing. And don't forget too about native prairie grasses could also be used, especially these are very deep rooted. But even looking at this, I don't even see everything that I have used on my farm. Here, I don't see chickling vetch. And sand foil, I think I've tried. So to me, it's like so much fun. Trying new cover crops. And this year, I also tried something that we are going to keep doing. And I have been farming on this land for over 40 years, and I'm still trying new things and incorporating new things. So I think I have a picture of it. I'll get to it the following slide. The other thing to think about is livestock. If you can include like a pasture in your crop rotation, like maybe you do corn, beans, corn, or you do 3 years of vegetables, and then you put in kind of a pasture mix. And maybe it doesn't have to be cattle. It could be hogs. It could be sheep. It could be chickens. We rotate chickens in our vegetable field. We plant a red clover for them. Usually we frost seed. I'm in Wisconsin, so we throw the seed in March on top of the snow. And then in the spring, we have this beautiful, tall, gorgeous red clover, and we move the chickens in there. And then the following year, we grow sweet corn there, and we don't have to add any fertility because the chickens have been doing that the whole season. And they also kept all the weeds from going to seed. So we have a pretty good weed control that next year because we've had the chickens in there. But if you don't want to have your own animals, you can maybe do custom grazing for someone else. And the other thing that having animals around is that you can then put them on fall cover crops and have them graze those. So, and again, get some that you don't want them to completely denude that cover crop, but see, then the nitrogen that they're leaving behind is taken up by those fall cover crops and not leached away through the winter. And then when you incorporate that fall cover crop, you then release that nitrogen in the spring when your cash crops need that. But of course, you'd need to think about fencing, either permanent or temporary. So this is not for everyone, but I have seen it work really well on many different farms. Here's another one. So I'm going to talk now about organic no-till, which is been done very successfully in soybeans. And the University of Iowa has been doing some research on doing a similar program with vegetables. So I'll talk mostly about the soybeans, but I could talk some about the vegetables too. So what you want to do is you want to get a good stand of rye. Typically, you might want to even put this in Wisconsin. We would put it in towards the end of August, so it gets a good growth and make sure we get it through the winter. We want it to you're going to plant it pretty thick because it's going to be your mulch the next spring. You'll be terminating it with a roller crimper, and then the next slide will have lots of pictures. Then you use a no-till drill, or for vegetables, you kind of come in with like a single shank, like ripper, and kind of rip up where you're going to plant your vegetables, transplant into the rye. And then you maybe want to see if anybody else in your neighborhood is doing this because you do need some specialized equipment. So this is somebody who actually harvested corn for silage. So it was harvested early in August. And then you can see what a good thick stand of rye they have for the next year. So I'm going to go around in a circle here. So the upper left has this piece of equipment called a roller crimper, and it's actually full of water because you want it. You're going to need a big tractor to pull it, although they have some small ones too that are just like 3 feet wide, so smaller, like for a smaller operation. And what's important, you really must crimp the rye. And the second slide in the upper middle, you can see how the rye has been crimped. See those breaks in the rye stalk? That's really the only thing that's going to kill the rye. If you I tried once, just rolling it down. I have a heavy roller and it just stood right back up. That was a failure. My vegetables did not grow very well with the rye standing on top of them. So you really need to have this crimping mechanism on the roller. And you can see how flat then that the upper picture in the upper right, how flat that has really pushed down the rye. Then in the lower left is a no-till drill that has come through, and you can see it's like pushed aside the rye and is planting the soybeans. Now you're probably going to plant whatever you're planting just a little bit heavier because you're going to have just like in the lower right hand, some of the soybeans don't make it all the way to the soil. So that soybean that's sitting in the hay mulch is not really going to germinate for you. But most of the soybeans do make it down into the soil and do quite well. And the same with vegetables. So you really want to make sure that rye is killed and laid flat. So here's a picture of the soybeans in the upper left. That they're not quite mature yet, obviously, because they're still green, but look at that mulch. And then the lower left, that is a field of soybeans that did not have any tillage. It just had that mulch. Do you see any weeds poking up? I sure don't. And I walked all through that field. That was I think about a 35-acre field. Um, so what you got so first of all, you didn't do any tillage since the fall before, because that rye was put in August. And then it stayed in place all through that growing season. And then you harvest the soybeans and the mulch is still there. And so you don't do any tillage until the following spring. So you've gone not quite 2 full years without any tillage and gotten a beautiful crop. The other picture in the upper right is, and I've seen this be successful too, is that rye, in order for it to grow to produce grain, winter rye, not annual ryegrass, but winter rye, will not get very large if planted in the spring. So I have seen producers, they have kind of a specialized planter that can plant the soybeans, and at the same time they have kind of a grass box on there, and they're dropping rye seed at the same time. And so that rye was not mowed, that's in between the soybeans. It's just sitting there. And like I said, nature hates a vacuum. But there is no vacuum in that field. There is rye growing in between the rows of soybeans. Now, the one issue with this is that the rye will get about 8 to 10 inches tall. So if you're growing soybeans for human grade food, it doesn't work because the beans will get somewhat stained during harvest by the ryegrass. But if it's feed grade soybeans, a dark Highland soybean, this works great. So I have seen this work in Iowa, in Wisconsin, in Illinois, in Michigan. So there's various ways of doing it. Like, have fun. Try it out. I've seen some people do maybe just like a 3 to 5 acre field, and just trial it all out. See how heavy they have to plant the soybeans, experiment. Because again, every field is different. Sandy field's going to react differently than a heavy clay field. But you can see that we got a good crop, a cash crop that also saved money because you didn't have to run equipment over the field, right? No diesel, no gas, no time. Just that planting in the spring, the roller crimping and the planting in the spring. I've also seen some farmers have this weed zapper that kind of goes above the soybeans, and it's electric. So if some weeds do start coming up through the mulch, they zap the weeds above the soybean. And that's another way to control weeds if for some reason the mulch is not thick enough. So interseeding. Now, again, this could be also in vegetables. I do this in vegetables. I interseed at my last cultivation. And in the bottom, in the middle there is a plant called Essex, and it's a cross between a brassica. It's a rapeseed hybrid that you can see how big those leaves are. And we had no weeds in our sweet corn this year. We just had this plant, and we had great sweet corn. that didn't really sap a lot of nutrients or, because corn was always way above it. Um, we could walk on it when we were harvesting. So very enthusiastic. It's the first year I've ever tried it, and we are going to do it again. But I learned it from people who were doing hundreds of acres of corn, field corn. um, so I just said, well, why wouldn't it work in my sweet corn? And of course it did. Um, in my area, and I believe it's anywhere, if you get you can actually hire a crop duster to come in and aerially seed into your corn crop or your soybean crop late in the season, like towards the end of August. And then it will grow. And then you'll have a winter cover crop that got a good start while, like I said, remember that you might want to get your rye in early. Well, this would be a way to get it in early, would be to aerially seed it. Now, you can get the timing right. Well, you might get a good rain after it's been seeded. That's the best, because aerial seeding can be a little tricky. And actually now, there are drones that can do aerial seeding. So you can do it small scale, large scale. It's just very exciting, all this great stuff. And in my area, and in the entire state of Wisconsin, and I think other states too, if you received any money from the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, under EQIP, the Environmental Quality and Service Program, to do cover crops, they will cover the cost of, well, they'll include, or how do I put this? They allow you to use the money that you're receiving for aerial seeding as well as ground seeding. So, this interseeding, especially later in the season, moisture is a big issue that you really do want to get that cover crop to get started. So, get your timing right. So I've seen people use red clover, Dutch white clover. I've seen people put in tillage radish. I've never tried that myself, but that might be something we would try. Um, so it's just, and then this can be done. Now I do some cover cropping, like in between my squash rows at last cultivation, come in and put in usually some clover, red clover. Um, I've done interseeding in between my tomato rows. Again, nature hates a vacuum. So every time that you are cultivating and you have bare soil, it's going to want to fill in with something green. So why don't you choose what that something green is and get a benefit from it? I just was out at a conference in Nebraska, and there was somebody there actually planting corn into a standing alfalfa field. What? So this is like an established alfalfa field, and he comes in with a big ripper and rips out where the corn is going to go. And he plants corn in there, and he was getting maybe about 15% yield drab, that which is not bad considering, again, that he didn't have to do any cultivating. Right? Because he had alfalfa out there. And then, of course, the alfalfa could be harvested, and the corn could be taken off, and then the next year you still have an alfalfa field. Um, so, and he has one certifier that let him put 2 years of corn. And then he just used that same furrow again. He did say that it did need to get a little bit of like chicken pellets in the row. That was useful, but he got a good yield. But this is what it looks like. You'd say, what? But in a way, they're symbiotic, because what is the alfalfa doing? It is taking nitrogen from the air and putting it in the soil. What does corn like? Nitrogen. So you kind of got a symbiotic relationship here. And this is a brand new system. I've never seen this before. Um, but, as organic farmers, we love to experiment and try new things. If you have small grains, it's a really good idea to always plant some kind of um, legume underneath, both for nitrogen, even if you're just going to till it in and not harvest it for hay or whatever. But again, it prevents the weeds from growing. And in my region, we have an issue with very tall giant ragweed. We don't get giant ragweed when you put and of course clover you can see is nice big leaves and really grows thick, um, and it doesn't really harm the small grain. And this is actually not new technology. This is what farmers have been doing forever. But with the advent of herbicides, we moved away from it. So we're going to keep up the good process. Another thing is to consider having hay as part of your rotation. Um, you can always, if you don't want to get hay harvesting equipment, you can see if, a lot of people custom harvest hay, but if you can grow high quality alfalfa, you can always find a market for it and get a good price. If you want to just grow a grassy hay and it happens to be kind of hobby farms around with people who have horses, you can get a good price for just grassy hay. And so a sod crop now you have this in place 2 or 3 years, you're not doing any tillage. And so you're building those soil aggregates and these deep rooted crops are breaking up any compaction. So having some kind of sod crop in rotation is a really good idea. And there, like I said, there's ways to still, you don't have to see it as kind of like a dead spot in your rotation, like I don't make any money. That during those years you can, but you also have to think too that they are then putting nitrogen and building aggregates and organic matter for the subsequent crop. So this is kind of like growing your own fertilizer, and so you save money on that. If you have organic livestock in your region, which we do here in Wisconsin, um, I have seen farmers who are neighbors have a really good relationship with their livestock producing neighbors. Because typically, like the livestock, especially if they're ruminant livestock, they have to have a lot of pasture. They maybe can't grow quite enough corn silage for themselves or even enough hay. And so you end up then growing the crops for them and working within their rotation. Sometimes they'll even give you the manure from their animals, which, that's a benefit, right? Get some free manure. But you can then grow small grains, grow silage. And I've seen this many times then you don't even need to have the forage harvesting equipment. They will come over if they're close enough and they'll harvest the corn silage. They'll harvest the hay. Um, and even too, like if you want to then put pasture in your rotation, they'll bring you over the heifers that'll only be there for the summer. So there's a lot that you could do with uh, having integrating livestock and not having to own them yourself. Um, and even if you have somebody who's got movable chicken coops and they use your pasture area for part of the summer or all the summer. And like I said, I rotate chickens through my vegetable fields. Um, and it's worked out really, really well. And so I think that might be the last slide. So, any questions? I'm curious what kind of production everyone does.